The sun rose over a small town that seemed quiet, ordinary, and untouched by the weight of human heartbreak. Yet, hidden in the middle of this stillness was a storm about to break loose. On a warm Saturday morning, with white roses carefully arranged at the steps of a grand hotel and a shiny black limousine waiting outside, an event was about to unfold that no guest, no groom, and no bride could ever have predicted. For while weddings are often celebrations of love, family, and fresh beginnings, this particular one carried the heavy stench of pride, cruelty, and a plan to humiliate. The groom had sent an invitation not out of kindness, but out of spite. He wanted his ex-wife, once the woman who had sacrificed everything for him, only to be left with nothing, to come and see what he called his real happily ever after. He wanted her to feel small, forgotten, and unworthy. But what he never expected was that she would show up not broken, not weeping, not weak, but stronger than ever, stepping out of a limousine with 3 little girls by her side, daughters he had abandoned, and whose beauty, confidence, and smiles would leave everyone in stunned silence. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and stories where life turns the tables on cruelty, then please take a second to like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. And don't forget to comment below. We love hearing your thoughts and feelings about these powerful stories. The story begins with Emma, a woman whose gentle spirit and hard-working nature often made her seem invisible in a world that only praised wealth and status. She had fallen in love with Daniel when they were young, and against the advice of her friends and family, she poured her heart, energy, and even her meager savings into building a future with him. Daniel came from a wealthy family, but he wanted to rise higher. For years, Emma supported his dreams, working extra shifts as a waitress, taking on cleaning jobs at night, and even skipping meals to make sure he had what he needed to chase his career. She believed in him more than she believed in herself. But when success finally touched his hands, Daniel changed. Money filled the spaces where love once lived, and instead of cherishing Emma for her loyalty and sacrifice, he began to see her as a burden, a reminder of his past struggles. The marriage grew cold, and one day, without much warning, Daniel filed for divorce. He left Emma with nothing but an old car that barely ran and a small apartment whose rent she could barely pay. Emma, heartbroken but determined, discovered just weeks after the divorce that she was pregnant, not with one child, but with triplets. Fear nearly crushed her. How would she raise 3 children alone with no money, no partner, and no support? Yet something inside her shifted that day. She realized that although she had been discarded, she was not powerless. She was going to be a mother, and those little lives depending on her would give her a reason to fight harder than she ever had before. And so began her years of struggle, days spent juggling 2 jobs, nights spent rocking 3 crying infants in her arms, and countless moments of exhaustion where she wanted to collapse but pushed forward because her daughters needed her. Meanwhile, Daniel climbed the social ladder, moving in circles of wealth and prestige. He never once asked about Emma or the children. To his friends, he spoke of his freedom from that poor woman, painting himself as the victim of a marriage that held him back. When he met Sophia, a young woman from a wealthy family, his ego soared. Here was his chance to prove he had upgraded, to show the world that he was finally where he deserved to be. As the wedding date approached, Daniel, driven by a mix of arrogance and bitterness, decided to invite Emma. He imagined her showing up in cheap clothes, maybe borrowing money for a bus ticket, watching from the sidelines while he married a woman of real worth. In his mind, this would seal Emma's humiliation. She would see how far he had risen and how low she had sunk. But Emma had been walking her own path quietly, far away from Daniel's shallow world. She had raised her daughters with love, discipline, and faith, instilling in them not just good manners but the courage to believe in themselves. Despite their financial struggles, Emma managed to secure a job at a small design studio. Her natural creativity soon attracted attention, and after years of perseverance, she opened her own boutique. What started as a small corner store soon grew into a respected business in town. She didn't flaunt her success, but she no longer lived in the shadows of her past. Her daughters, now 6 years old, were beautiful, bright, and full of life, her greatest achievement. When the wedding invitation arrived, Emma nearly threw it away. But then she thought of the years of humiliation she had endured, the way Daniel had abandoned them, and the whispers of people who once pitied her. This was not about revenge, but about dignity. She wanted to show her daughters that no one had the right to define their worth. And so, with calm resolve, she decided to attend. The morning of the wedding was bright and golden. Guests arrived in sleek cars, wearing glamorous dresses and expensive suits. Daniel stood tall in his white tuxedo, soaking in the admiration of his friends. Sophia, glowing in her fitted gown, smiled at the cameras flashing around her. Everything was unfolding perfectly, until the sound of another limousine pulling up at the entrance turned heads. People whispered. Who could it be? Slowly, the chauffeur stepped out and opened the door. Out came 3 little girls dressed in matching yellow dresses, holding hands, their curls bouncing as they walked confidently onto the red carpet. Behind them, Emma emerged in a deep green gown, her figure elegant, her face radiant, her eyes calm but strong. Gasps filled the air. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Daniel's smirk faded instantly. Sophia's smile stiffened. And Emma, holding her daughter's hands, walked forward with poise, her presence commanding more attention than the bride herself. The groom's face turned pale, and for the first time in years, guilt flickered in his eyes. But his pride refused to let him falter. Why is she here? People heard him whisper, though the answer was obvious. Emma was no longer the broken, abandoned woman he once knew. She was a mother, a fighter, and a woman who had risen from ashes with grace. The guests who had once heard Daniel's cruel stories about her could now see the truth. They saw the respect in the way her daughters looked up at her, the way she carried herself without bitterness, and the quiet strength that made her glow brighter than any jewel in the room. Sophia shifted uncomfortably, realizing that the comparison unfolding in people's eyes was not in her favor. Emma did not need diamonds or wealth to shine. Her dignity, her resilience, and the living proof of her journey, those 3 little girls, were more powerful than any fortune. The ceremony continued, but the air had changed. Whispers followed Emma everywhere she went. Some guests discreetly congratulated her. Others apologized with their eyes for ever believing Daniel's lies. The triplets laughed, their innocence melting hearts, and Emma simply smiled, knowing she had nothing left to prove. Daniel had tried to disgrace her, but instead, he had revealed his own emptiness. Emma's presence was not about revenge, it was a testimony of survival, love, and transformation. She sat through the vows without bitterness, not once trying to ruin the event, because she didn't need to. Her very existence was enough to rewrite the story. By the end of the night, the one detail people remembered most wasn't Sophia's dress, the flowers, or even the vows. It was the moment Emma arrived in that limousine, holding the hands of 3 beautiful daughters, her head held high. The photographs captured that instant of shock on Daniel's face, the awe in the crowd, and the radiance of a woman who had risen above cruelty. In the days that followed, whispers spread across the community. Daniel's arrogance was exposed, and people began questioning his character. Meanwhile, Emma's boutique grew even more popular. Customers flocked not just because of her designs but because of the story behind her strength. She became a quiet inspiration, proof that sometimes the best revenge is living well, with dignity, without ever needing to speak a word. And so, the woman who was once abandoned and humiliated found herself more respected and admired than ever. Not because she had money, not because she wanted revenge, but because she had walked through fire and come out shining. Her daughters grew up knowing their mother's worth, not their father's cruelty, and Emma herself finally found peace. She understood that pain had shaped her but not defined her, and that love, not wealth, was the true measure of success. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that remind the world about the power of kindness, resilience, and dignity. And before we end, we'd love for you to comment below, what would you have done if you were in Emma's place? Because sometimes, your thoughts and